It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the CEO and the business owner of SportsTrace, Max Montrey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, Brandon. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start your sports business?
Yeah, it's because I wasn't very good at sports. Honestly, like no one would ever pay me to play baseball, although I loved the game. And it was many years ago, I had this idea, how could we use video to make athletes better? And I'd done some things with some really fancy cameras, but it was actually about last year, a trip that my co-founder Alex Gardner and I took down to Texas to visit Rice and to visit University of Texas and see them play baseball before the pandemic. And we realized that there was an interest in the technology that we have and that it could be applied to sports generally. So with that interest, we decided to leave Microsoft and endeavor upon a sports technology business.
Can you talk about, of course, how you came up with the name of your business and what software and stuff you use?
It's funny. So when we started, right, I was just kind of looking for URLs that were available that had sports in the name because I thought it could be applied more broadly. And, you know, when you're going out to look for a URL, you keep clicking things in. No, that's taken. And luck of the draw, SportsTrace just actually was available, but it fit, right? Because we are literally tracing the body in motion, which is pretty cool. The technologies we originally used, like I said before, there were some really specific fancy cameras, but somebody asked us in Berlin a couple of years ago when we were kicking around the idea of making this a company, hey, is this something that you could do with a cell phone? Because that'd be super powerful. If you could just get video from athletes and coaches, and you could start to recognize 3D motion from that cell phone video and then give them back some insights on their play and how they could improve. We said, yeah, let's try to do that. Let's make it as easy as possible for people. So we actually do most of our processing up in the cloud. Obviously work for Microsoft. So we started with Azure, but we also use AWS now. So there's a lot of different cloud services there, the technology, but it's mostly around that idea of computer vision, artificial intelligence, and machine learning.
Of course, when you work with these athletes and particularly teams, how do you go about contacting them to get them involved?
It's an interesting process. So I'll never say that there are any silver linings to a pandemic, Brandon, but I will say this. It has afforded us the opportunity to network with lots of people in sports that perhaps we wouldn't have had the chance to do before. So reaching out to people has really been one of the biggest ways, although we get introduced to potential customers from other friends of the program as well. And the conversations are always the same though, right? It is about what are you doing in your program or what are you doing in your training? What's working, what's not, and what would you like to see improve? And, you know, it's not a sales pitch. It's really about understanding what people value and what can help them.
What sports do you offer with SportsTrace?
Yeah, so this is a funny one, Brandon, because we kind of fell backwards into the sports we cover. I used to play baseball. I coached softball in college, and my co-founder, he played golf in college. So we started with those sports, but there was a really good fit there. And that fit was around isolated scenarios that we could accurately measure and high technology adoption rate from the users, from whether it's coaches or athletes or whatever.
What is it?
I'm sorry.
What is it like tracing the movement of the players?
It's interesting, right? So there are some things we can do and some things we can't do. What we're working on right now is actually building 3D models so that we could represent that athlete in 3D, because we're currently capturing parts of the body that move in 3D space. honestly, the way that the computer vision works, we have to build models around, well, what does a human body look like? How do I know that this is a shoulder versus it's a hand? And then how do I know which one is which? And the tricky part of that is obviously, I would say, the depth component. How do we accurately represent, if I'm moving backwards or if I'm moving forwards? It's something else.
Of course, when you talked about the sports that you cover, as you cover softball, baseball, and golf, do you cover other sports like soccer, basketball, football?
So it's interesting. We just started in cricket, believe it or not. We've gotten some interest in cricket, and we hired a business development lead in cricket out of India. His name's Shreyansh Mota, and I was actually on the call with him earlier today. The work that we've done in other sports, I would say right now, has been experimental. We've worked with a Premier League soccer team around the idea, not necessarily of them training on the field, but the idea of physical therapy and rehabilitation and how athletes are screened for their movements, which has led to some conversations in healthcare as well.
Of course, with your product, is it more like use your phone and scan, and then obviously you'll pick up the syllable, like the skull and stuff like that? Or is it more like you have to put something on their leg or something for them to?
What's kind of cool for us, Brandon, is that we can just use video and we don't need to be scanning live. In fact, one of my favorite demos is where I'm taking a video with my phone of a video playing on a TV or a computer, and I load that into the system and it can still recognize that body in 3D. So it could be new video, it could be video taken by your phone, it can be video that you upload from another source. As long as you've got pretty good quality video, we can process it.
Of course, with that, what is it like knowing, obviously, with all of the rules and regulations about recording videos off of TVs where they have the rights? What is that tricky?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it is kind of tricky, Brandon. I think you state it pretty well. So my co-founder and I, we worked a lot at Microsoft on the concept of GDPR, privacy. And we're highly respectful of individuals' privacy. Like we don't go out and sell data. We don't give it to anybody else. Your data is your data, and that's that. If we're taking video of events that are occurring right in front of our faces and we're processing it to generate new data, again, we're not necessarily sharing that with other people. We're just using it to prove that our technology works.
Of course, in the future, do you see your technology using like UFC fights and such things like that?
I would love to. We have a long plan for different sports over the next several years. I think I'd love to get into those more territorial sports. We get asked about basketball, football, hockey, and soccer all the time. I love the idea of MMA and UFC. That's very cool. We've been asked about wrestling and Olympic sports, obviously with the interest in the Olympics as of late. And even things that I couldn't even have imagined, right? Like I've done a little ballroom dancing and people have said that might be great too. Or what about figure skating? So, we love these ideas, and our entry into physical therapy and rehabilitation, we've talked to some folks, we've done some pilots. So we think it's kind of a cool idea. Yeah, we got a long-term vision for this. Like how can we help to create structured data of human movement out of video?
How has your technology helped, like, let's say MLB scouts, when they go out to scout out a player, a prospective prospect? How does that help them to see, like, okay, this is where they might be, like, when they're like 18, or this might be where they are, like, when they're 23, when we can draft them?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, well, one, the scale of what we do, I feel lends itself to much broader scouting. We'd had use cases, if you take the idea of scouting a little bit further to like college recruiting, where these colleges sometimes will just get reams of data from a player. How can we very easily intake that video data and process it and start to make some sense of it and say, all right, for this individual, how consistent are different parts of their swing or their pitch, right? And we want to get to a point where we're identifying some key areas that may be more troublesome or maybe more positive for individuals so that they can correct it sooner.
Of course, have you seen with your software that you use any MLB scouts using it?
So we've been contacted by a few MLB teams to process some data. We've seen mostly, actually, we typically interact with 3 different sports entities. Teams will interact with training facilities, and then we do integrations with our service to other providers. So that's mostly who we're out there talking to. But we have folks, because the app is live and in the app stores right now, they download it all the time.
How does your software help college coaches and professional coaches?
It's interesting because, so our backgrounds at Microsoft kind of lent ourselves to parts of this problem. And one of the biggest issues that we saw is one, I mean, think about the video on your phone, Brandon, because you're taking videos all the time, right? There's tons of stuff on here. How do you keep it organized and make sense of it? When you're literally filming all of your games and practices, how much of that video are you actually using? What can you go back to and what can't you? And then in addition to that, there are tons of other incredible data sources that teams and coaches use. I mean, just to name a few, there's blast motion sensors in baseball, TrackMan in baseball, golf, softball, Rapsodo, FlightScope, Diamond Kinetics. There's a giant list of these. One of the things that we thought would be cool was, how can we put together the analysis that we do of video and the great user experience that we're creating around video with some of these other data sources? And that's gotten a lot of interest.
How far back can your technology read? So like, let's say if I was an MLB scout and I went to go scout out, let's say a high school player, and then like, obviously they'll go, like, let's say they're now their senior year of college. Can you go back as far as their senior year of high school?
If they have video of it, yes. We like to say that we can take video from any cell phone. Now, what's interesting about that is that people have absolutely tested us on that, right? And sent us video that's from a cell phone that's like 10 years old, which gets a little tough because my video on my cell phone right now is much better than it was 10 years ago, than like some old flip phone. But that said, we've had pretty reasonable results with older video too. And the cell phones that most people are carrying around in their pockets right now, in addition to in-stadium solutions or some of the fancier cameras that teams and coaches have, we can absolutely process that. So if we're going back just a couple of years, that's perfect.
What are some of your future plans with your business, SportsTrace?
Wow. Well, first I want to say that it's great that teams have been able to get back on the field. That's been awesome. I know it's obviously been challenging times for everybody recently. So it's good that folks got back onto the field for the season. We're excited for that. And I know that teams are now in a spot where they can start to evaluate what's working for them and what's not. And we'd love to be a part of that journey. We've been hot on the trail as of late, actually selling. I just got back from Houston, but this summer I've been to Dallas, Chicago, Omaha for the College World Series, Atlanta, Nashville, Memphis, Birmingham, like all over the place, just visiting with folks and having conversations. So for the very near term, we're pushing really hard to meet with customers to understand what will work with them with SportsTrace and to set them up for success. In the medium term, we've been doing some really cool integrations with other data providers, both where we take their data and combine it with what we're doing, and from the perspective of, hey, they would love a great SportsTrace experience inside of their platform. So some really amazing partnerships that we're forging right now.
That's wonderful. Where can my listeners find you at on social media? And what advice would you give sports business owners looking to start?
Sure. So we're at SportsTrace, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can always find us there. And what advice would I give to sports business and sports technology owners? You know, it's kind of like the regular life advice, is that you have to be absolutely persistent. Know that going in, that not everything early on is going to be a success. So just get ready for that, to continue to grind and do the things that you need to do, but know that there's other folks out there that have gone through it. Everyone wants somebody to talk to.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you again for your interview and best of luck in your future with SportsTrace.
Thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Max, for your interview and best of luck in your future with SportsTrace.
Thanks.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.